Hi, I'm Mitra Sorrells in the PhocusWire studio, and I am joined by Loren Kosloske. He is Head of Growth and New Products for Travel and Airports at Uber. Welcome. That's a bit of a mouthful.
It is
Quite
very
a title.
long. It is very long.
So maybe if you can start by just explaining to us a bit more about the scope of your work.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, my title is pretty long. So there's two main focuses. The first is on growth, and that's predominantly focused on our rideshare business. So how do we get people to come back to Uber, coming out of the pandemic, predominantly focused on airport trips, hotel trips, things within the travel space.
Okay.
The other focus is around new products, and really like how do we, continue to expand across the travel space with a heavy focus of, we already know you're taking a trip to and from an airport or to and from a hotel. So how can we service customers within the travel use case? So those new products is really what I focus on as well.
Okay, so certainly you've been very busy in the last year, 6 months or so, because I know we've covered quite a bit of the news of what's been happening with Uber. So let me just run through and you tell me if I'm missing anything. So we have Uber Travel, that is kind of connecting all the elements of an itinerary. We just announced yesterday that it is now expanding to 10,000 cities around the world. So that's very interesting. We can talk more about that. Then you also, in the UK, it also has the integration of the rail and the coach ground transportation options.
Correct.
Okay, and then I know a little bit separate maybe is the Uber Explorer. You announced the partnership with Viator for experiences. You can book an experience and then book your trip, your travel at the same time. It's all very interesting. Tell me a little bit about what's happening there and the strategy behind that.
Yeah, I think we'll first start with probably Uber Explorer.
Okay.
So the idea around that is really, we already know people are taking Uber, around their local community for dinner reservations, thus the open table stuff in Mexico City, or to and from concerts, different experiences. So really what we're trying to do within the local aspect is how can we, surface information to you, but also, nudge you to take an Uber to and from those. So through the Uber Explorer, not only can you book, but also you get 10% off your ride to and from. So, it's great if you can go other places and book, that's fantastic. But we're really trying to say like, hey, we're trying to lower the overall cost of getting to and from. So that's really where the Uber Explorer mentality is focused on.
Okay.
And then, dabbling in Mexico City with dinner reservations is really just trying to see like what things resonate with users and what things maybe don't. With our work with Viator, we obviously saw experiences were a big one.
Yeah.
So we went bigger and deeper with that, and thus the expansion related to that. On the travel front, you're right, there's two totally different experiences. We have the UK experience, and then we have the experience that is in 10,000 plus cities here in the US and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and most of Europe. And what we're really trying to do there is the same type of thing, is how can we make it simple, easy, assistive, and like relatively personalized across your travel journey, and push you towards reserved rides. And in the UK, that's we want you to take a car if that's great, but also trains, bus. We've touched on flights as well as something that's coming. So we're very focused on like that multimodality strategy.
I'm curious why the UK?
Yeah, that's a question we get a lot.
Yeah.
So first off, most of our business is in the US.
Yeah.
That's where we started predominantly. So the UK is a great testing environment where, consumers are relatively similar to what we see in the US. As we were dabbling or into some of these new modalities, the expectation around earning points is not as strong as you see in the US. So that takes out one variable. And then just because it is like a very similar market and we have relatively strong market share, it allows us to really focus in on reducing the variables to really test, are users willing to think about Uber is more than just a rides platform?
Okay. And of course, rail and coach is big there.
Correct.
So that gives an opportunity with that. So you touched on it, and I know when we first covered it back in the spring, there was talk of adding, I think, hotels even with that UK test, and I think I heard you mention flights. I mean, so there's more coming there potentially? Yeah,
so we have already publicly announced that we will be doing flights. That came out in our April release. I think as we think about hotels and things outside of more of a transportation space, we really need to first test and validate and see that people are willing to consider us in the mobility side first before we go big into some of the other spaces. We would love to see that, but I think the UK is really what's going to dictate what we see there. And we're really focused on what do our users telling us, not,
right.
Where's most of the money coming from in the traveler wallet. We're really trying to see what works best for our users and how can we connect and make what's the right place for us to play.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then when this functionality comes to bear in the UK, I could book a flight in the Uber app.
That would be the intention, yes.
Wow, that's super interesting. So I'd imagine that would be in some airline partners and such that you'd be working with on that?
Yeah, more will be coming.
Yeah.
And I think that's the question a lot of people have is how is Uber thinking about it?
Yeah.
It's a question we've got a lot here at Phocuswright as well.
Yeah.
So I would say like it's coming.
Okay.
Wait and see.
Okay. You'll let me know though. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So of course, as we start to think about all of these efforts that Uber is undertaking, the term that I know you've heard, I'm sure, is super app.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, I guess I'm curious, do you folks think in terms of we're becoming a super app, or is that an outside thing?
I think it's more of an outside thing.
Yeah.
What we plan to do if we go a super app, if not, that's really up to Dara and our C-suite.
Yeah.
I would say what we're focused on is just really executing on what we do best and focusing on like what's in the near term. We've selected to do travel in the Rides app, which is our mobility app, for the reason that you're already taking an Uber to and from. I think if they ever want to combine those things, great. If they want to keep them separate, fantastic. If they even want to spin out a new app, great. At the end of the day, that's not going to dictate our strategy or change how we're approaching our partnerships, our move into the travel space more broadly.
Anything else that you can share that maybe is on your radar as far as thinking about, the next year or 3 to 5 years even about this concept of new products in the travel space?
Yeah, I think we're looking at like what makes the most sense from an adjacency move for our users. So I think right now we're predominantly focused on the trains, the buses. I think if we see the good traction, it will really blow the door open on how we think about it. The next step we'll have to really think about is how do we get users to think differently about coming to the Uber app and like servicing and shopping for those types of experiences. Today, we're predominantly known as an on-demand platform. So I think one of the big first steps we did in that was our reserve feature, which allows people to, book up to 30 days in advance and trying to get that planning intent. You're seeing the similar type of interactions with coach and bus. When we eventually do flights, that I think is going to be even a bigger step.
Yeah.
And then you alluded to like hotels, like those things are even further out and very different.
Yeah.
So I think if we can show the right traction with what we're doing on the mobility side, it'll be very curious to see where it goes. Obviously, experiences is also a big one if we think about Uber Explore. But really how we've focused it is where people are already taking Ubers to and from that we feel would be like a logical step for consumers to think about.
Yeah. So potentially, as we're finishing up, I guess I would just ask, we will potentially be hearing more news from Uber on some of these topics even in 2023?
Yeah, I think one of the things that even people have been talking about is just like how is the success of Uber Travel as it is just as our itinerary feature? How is Reserve performing as we continue to expand that globally? But then also, what are we seeing from Explore and as we are, now that we launched trains and buses in August, like what are the first steps looking at like answering our consumers willing to engage with us? We will definitely have to do readouts in 2023 to help understand that. I think too, if we see the success, then we'll probably, be announcing expansions or, topics like that. But I think the first big communication and topics will be just around, are we seeing the right user behavior we want? And I would assume that would definitely come out.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Loren Kosloske from Uber, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.